I'm still trying to make sense of everything that's happened even now. Even though it happened 3 years ago, I'm still coming to terms with it. At the time, I was 61 years old, and I was living in Houston, Texas, where I'd spent most of my adult life just working in the oil industry and doing whatever it is that I was doing. I'd been divorced for quite a long time at that point, wasn't looking for anyone, and I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I was just focused on getting to retirement with enough money to actually enjoy it. I'd seen too many guys work themselves into the ground for 40 years, only to retire with nothing but a government check and a broken body. I wasn't going to be one of those guys. I had $280,000 saved up between my 401k, my IRA, and the equity from selling my house after the divorce was finally settled. It wasn't a fortune, especially not in Texas where everything was getting more expensive by the year, but I felt confident about the future. At 6% return, that could generate around $16,800 a year, plus my Social Security when I turned 62, would add another $18,000 or so. I could live on $35,000 a year if I was smart about it. But then I started hearing guys at work talk about the Philippines, how you could live like a king on $2,000 a month, how the weather was perfect year-round, how you could buy land near the beach for next to nothing and build a house for cheap. One guy showed me pictures of his place in Dumaguete, 24. 3 bedrooms, ocean view, full-time maid, and he said his total monthly expenses were $1,800, including everything. That stuck with me. If I could live on half of what I'd need in Texas, my money would last twice as long. Maybe I could even buy some property, watch it appreciate, and have something to leave behind or sell later if I needed to. I was 61 when I first started seriously thinking about retiring early. I'd spent 38 years in the oil and gas industry, mostly in operations management, just grinding it out in Houston's heat and humidity. I felt like I was pretty boring, really. Wake up, go to work, come home, watch TV, go to bed, repeat for decades. I had $280,000 saved up, although it wasn't a fortune, but I felt optimistic about the future. I'd sold my house after the divorce settlement was finalized. We'd split everything 50-50, and after the lawyer fees and paying off what was left on the mortgage, I walked away with about $95,000 from the house. The rest was from my retirement accounts that I'd been contributing to since my 22nd. I got married in 1982. We went on to have 2 kids. It was a decent marriage for the first 15 years or so, but we just grew apart. Different interests, different friends, different goals. She wanted to travel and spend money. I wanted to save and prepare for retirement. By the time 2015 came around, I was 58 and completely worn out from the constant arguments about money. The divorce took 2 years to finalize. It was nasty enough that we barely spoke by the end. She wanted everything: the house, my retirement accounts, alimony. We settled on splitting the marital assets down the middle, and I agreed to pay her $1,200 a month for 3 years as part of the settlement. By the time 2017 rolled around and those payments stopped, I was 60 and exhausted. By the time 2018 came around, I started thinking, why was I even staying in Houston? My kids were grown. My daughter was 32 and living in California. My son was 29 and working in Dallas. I saw them maybe twice a year. I had no ties keeping me there except inertia. I could retire early at 62 and take reduced Social Security. I could live in the Philippines on the money I had. I could have a nice place, maybe meet someone, and I could be respected for once, instead of just being another divorced guy living alone in a 1-bedroom apartment. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I started doing research, watching YouTube videos, reading expat forums, joining Facebook groups. One thing that kept coming up was the opportunity to buy land. In Texas, you couldn't touch anything decent for under $50,000 an acre, and that's for land in the middle of nowhere. But in the Philippines, guys were talking about beachfront lots for $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, some even cheaper if you knew where to look. I let myself believe it because I wanted something like that to be true so badly. I'd never owned land before. The idea of having a piece of property with an ocean view that I paid cash for, with no mortgage, no property taxes eating me alive. That sounded like the American dream, just in a different country. I joined a dating site in the Philippines. I forgot what the name of it was. Filipino Cupid, I think. But it was clear that there were more girls on there than guys, and it was quite interesting to receive messages from girls in their early 30 seconds saying they wanted a serious relationship with someone just like me. I got it that they came from a poor background and needed financial support. I get they wanted a better life, but I wanted a better life as well. And by being with someone like that, I thought I would have a better life. I wasn't naive about it, I knew the score. But I figured if I was going to support someone anyway, and I'd been supporting my ex-wife for years, at least this time it would be someone who appreciated it and actually wanted to be with me. Before long, I started talking to one girl who was from Leyte province. Her name was Tessie. She was 31 years old, but it was as if she completely looked past my age and appearance and looked at who I was inside as a person. At least that's what I told myself. What really caught my attention was that Tessie wasn't working in a bar or as a massage therapist like so many of the other girls I'd talked to. She said she worked as a real estate agent in Ormoc City, and before that, she'd worked at a hotel as a receptionist. She sent me pictures of property listings she was working on, houses, condos, land for sale. She seemed professional, educated, and ambitious. We started chatting every single day. She'd message me in the morning before I went to work, which was her evening because of the time difference. And then we'd video call most nights. She spoke excellent English with barely any accent. She told me she'd studied tourism management at a local college and had always worked in customer service roles. I told her about my plans to retire early, to move to the Philippines, and to maybe buy some land as an investment. That's when she really got excited. She started sending me listings for properties in Leyte, beachfront lots, agricultural land, residential plots. She said she could help me find something perfect, that as a real estate agent she knew all the best deals before they hit the market, and that foreigners were always getting ripped off because they didn't know the local prices. You need someone you can trust, she said, someone who knows the area and can protect you from scammers. I thought I'd found exactly that. A partner who wasn't just interested in me romantically, but who could also help me navigate the property market in the Philippines. It seemed perfect. Too perfect, really, but I didn't want to think about that. It only took me 3 months to decide to go and see her. I booked a ticket to Manila with a connecting flight to Ormoc. I'd never been to the Philippines before, but Tessie assured me she'd pick me up from the airport and show me around. She said I could stay at her place. She lived in a small apartment in the city, and we could spend 2 weeks together looking at properties and getting to know each other in person. When I told my daughter I was going to meet a woman I'd been talking to online and she was 30 years younger than me and lived in the Philippines, I could hear her sigh as if to say, "Dad, are you serious?" But I didn't care. I'd spent enough years being careful and responsible and doing what everyone expected me to do. For once, I was going to do something for myself. When I called my son and told him that I met someone, and she's actually younger than you, I could hear him pause on the other end of the line. "Dad, just be careful, okay? I've heard stories." "What kind of stories?" "You know, guys going over there, meeting women, spending all their money. Just don't do anything stupid with your retirement fund." I told him I wasn't stupid, that Tessie was different, that she had her own career, and wasn't asking me for money, which was technically true at the time. She never asked for anything. She paid for her own phone load to call me. She never mentioned money at all, which I actually found reassuring. But part of me knew what the game was in the Philippines. And part of me had already come to the conclusion that she was probably interested in me primarily because I was an American with money. But I chose to ignore it. I told myself that as long as we both benefited from the relationship, what did it matter? She'd get financial security, I'd get companionship, and help navigating a foreign country. It seemed fair. My daughter was more direct. "Dad, please don't buy any property over there. Please, just rent something and see how you like it first. Don't put anything in someone else's name. I've read about foreigners losing everything." "I'm not an idiot," I told her. "I know the laws. I know foreigners can't own land. I'm just going to look at some investment opportunities. Nothing serious. The other thing that should have been a red flag was how quickly Tessie wanted to talk about property and investments. I mean, we'd been chatting for less than a month when she started sending me listings. Most women I'd talked to on dating sites wanted to know about my hobbies, my family, what I like to do for fun. Tessie asked some of those questions, but she always steered the conversation back to real estate, to opportunities in the Philippines, to how smart it would be to buy land now before prices went up. Ormoc is growing so fast, she'd say. In 5 years, beachfront land will be triple the price. If you buy now, you'll make so much money. I told myself she was just excited to share her professional expertise with me, that she was trying to be helpful, that she wanted me to see the potential of the Philippines the way she did. I didn't want to admit that maybe she saw me as a walking ATM with $280,000 in the bank and no one to tell me no. For the first 2 weeks I was in Leyte, everything was amazing. Tessie picked me up from the airport in Ormoc, took me to her apartment, a small one-bedroom place that was clean and modest, and showed me around the city. We went to restaurants, visited her family in a rural barangay about an hour outside the city, and spent time at the beach. I found myself attracted to her more than I expected. She was beautiful, yes, but more than that, she was attentive and interested in everything I had to say. She asked about my work, my life in Texas, my kids, my plans for retirement. She made me feel important. It had been years since anyone had made me feel that way. We also spent a lot of time looking at properties. Tessie took me to see residential lots in subdivisions, agricultural land that could supposedly be converted to commercial use, and several beachfront plots that took my breath away. I'd never seen anything like it. White sand, crystal clear water, palm trees swaying in the breeze. And the prices seemed unbelievable. $25,000 for a quarter-acre lot with beach access. $40,000 for a half-acre directly on the water. In Texas, this would cost millions, I told her. That's why you need to buy now, she said, before other foreigners figure it out and prices go up. After dating for 6 weeks, 4 of those in person during my initial visit, that's when we decided to take things further. I'd gone back to Texas after my first 2-week trip, but we video called every single day. I found myself counting down the hours until I could talk to her. My apartment in Houston felt empty and depressing. The weather was miserable. It was August and brutally hot. I had nothing to do and nowhere to be. I decided to retire early. I was 61, almost 62, and I could start collecting reduced Social Security. It would only be about $18,000 a year, instead of the $24,000 I'd get if I waited until full retirement age, but I didn't care. I was done with Houston, done with working, done with being alone. I told Tessie I was moving to the Philippines permanently, and she was thrilled. "You can stay with me," she said. "My apartment. We could look at buying some land and building a house, something that's ours." Her eyes lit up when I said that. "Really? You would do that?" "Why not? If I'm going to live there permanently, I should invest in property. You said yourself it's a good investment." Within a month, I'd sold everything I owned in Texas, packed 2 suitcases, and moved to the Philippines. By the time I arrived in October 2018, Tessie and I had already decided to get married. It seemed like the logical next step. We'd been together for 6 months, we were living together, and I wanted to make things official. She was working as a real estate agent and making around $300 a month, which wasn't much even by Philippine standards. I agreed to support her financially so she could quit her job and focus on helping me find the right property to invest in. I started sending her $500 a month to cover her personal expenses and contribution to her family. I felt like this was a fair amount, and it wasn't even touching my principal savings. I could cover that easily from my Social Security income. I was happy to make those changes because a part of me always was looking for a connection and to have someone to go home to in the evenings. We'd cook dinner together, speeties. She taught me how to make adobo and sinigang, watch Philippine TV shows that I didn't really understand but enjoyed anyway, and make plans for our future. She was sweet, affectionate, and made me feel like I'd finally done something right with my life. After we had lived together for 2 months and been in a relationship for 8 months total, I had to pull the trigger and ask her to marry me. I wanted to take things further with her and I felt like she would want the same, which she did. And we decided to get married, both excited about it. We had a simple civil ceremony at the Municipal Hall in Ormoc in December 2018, just before Christmas. Her family came, her mother, her 3 sisters, her brother, and what seemed like dozens of cousins and relatives I'd never met. They were all very friendly, very welcoming, and kept telling me how lucky Tessie was to have found such a good man. I felt like the lucky one. I was 62 years old, newly married to a beautiful 2-year-old woman, living in a tropical paradise, and ready to start the next chapter of my life. Everything was falling into place, exactly as I'd hoped. After things went smoothly for 3 months of being married, it only seemed logical to look for land. I wasn't about to rush into things, though. And first things first, let's just buy one lot and see how it goes. Tessie had been showing me properties since before we were married, but now that we were officially husband and wife, she said she could get me access to even better deals. Family land, she called it. Land that's been in families for generations, but they need money now and are willing to sell cheap to someone they trust. She took me to see a property about an hour south of Ormoc, right along the coast. It was a beautiful spot, a half-acre lot with direct beach access, surrounded by coconut trees, with a small nipper hut already on the property. The owner was an elderly woman who Tessie said was her mother's cousin or something like that. The woman needed money for medical expenses and was selling the land for $35,000. After looking around for about a week and seeing several other properties, I settled on this one. It seemed to offer everything I was looking for. I looked at what similar properties were selling for. I'd learned how to navigate Philippine real estate websites, and beachfront land in the area was listed anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000, depending on size and location. At $35,000 for a half-acre, it seemed like a good price, and we should be able to either build on it ourselves or resell it later for a nice profit. I was hesitant about the money, though. $35,000 was a significant chunk of my savings. But Tessie walked me through the math. If you keep your money in the bank earning 1%, you make $350 a year on $35,000. But if you buy this land and it goes up even 10% in the next year, you make $3,500. And if you hold it for 5 years and it doubles, you make $35,000. It sounded logical. I'd worked in the oil industry, not finance, but I understood the basic concept of appreciating assets. I sold $35,000 worth of my investments. I had to liquidate part of my IRA, which meant paying taxes and an early withdrawal penalty, but I convinced myself it was worth it. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I wired the money to Tessie's bank account, and she handled all the paperwork since she was the real estate agent and spoke Tagalog. Within 2 weeks, we owned the property, or rather, Tessie owned the property. As a foreigner, I wasn't allowed to own land in the Philippines, most definitely not land and therefore not a house built on land. That was something that really annoyed me, because I felt like if I could have done everything properly in my own name, things may have turned out better. But the law was clear. Foreigners could own condos but not land. The only way around it was to have a Filipino citizen hold the title. But we're married, Tessie said. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine. It doesn't matter whose name is on the paper. I wanted to believe that. We were legally married. In theory, marital assets were shared, and even if something happened to her, I'd inherit the property as her surviving spouse. That's what I told myself. We went to visit the land after the sale was finalized. Standing there on the beach, looking out at the ocean, feeling the warm breeze and hearing the waves, I felt like I'd made the right decision. This was mine. Well, ours. This was our little piece of paradise that we could build on, retire on, or sell later if we needed to. This is just the beginning, Tessie said, squeezing my hand. This is going to change our lives. She had no idea how right she was. After 6 months went smoothly, we'd visit the land every few weeks, clear some of the vegetation, make plans for what we might build. It only seemed logical to look for another property. And we found one that was equally as good, but this time it was inland, about 20 minutes from Ormoc City proper. This property was different. It was a full acre of flat land in a developing residential area, perfect for building a house. The price was $45,000, which was more than the beach lot, but Tessie explained that residential land closer to the city was always more expensive because of the convenience. Water, electricity, and internet were all available. The roads were paved. It was in a subdivision with security. "We can build our house here," she said. "The beach lot is for investment, but this is where we can actually live." I should have thought I looked for somewhere else, considered other options, maybe even rented for a while longer to see if we really wanted to settle in Leyte. But my wife said, "Buy it now before someone else does. These lots are selling fast," which I probably shouldn't have done, but I did. I liquidated another $45,000 from my retirement accounts. The penalties and taxes were killing me. I was losing about 20% to fees every time I made an early withdrawal, but Tessie assured me it would be worth it in the long run. The land was purchased in February 2019, about 2 months after we bought the beach lot. Once again, the title went in Tessie's name. Once again, I told myself it didn't matter because we were married. We immediately started making plans to build a house. Tessie said her brother-in-law was a contractor and could build us a nice 3-bedroom house for about $25,000. In Texas, you couldn't build a shed for that price, but Tessie showed me examples of houses he'd built. Simple concrete structures with tile roofs, basic but sturdy. "We'll have our own place," she said. "No more renting, no more small apartment, a real home." I agreed to the construction budget, $25,000, plus another $3,000 for furniture and appliances. We'd move in by the end of the year, live there for a few years, and then maybe retire to the beach lot once we built something there. Our budget was $73,000 total. Spent so far: $35,000 for beach land, $45,000 for residential land, plus I'd already started transferring money for construction costs. I'd started with $280,000. I now had about $195,000 remaining after taxes, penalties, and the land purchases. I told myself I still had plenty. With $195,000 generating returns and my Social Security covering basic living expenses, we'd be fine. More than fine. We owned 2 properties that were appreciating in value. We were building equity instead of throwing money away on rent. This was smart investing. That's what I kept telling myself. 6 months later, in August 2019, Tessie said we needed a car. Her reasoning was completely logical. We were traveling back and forth to the construction site almost every day, relying on tricycles and jeepneys, spending money on transportation, and wasting hours. If we had our own vehicle, we could save time and money in the long run. I looked at it and considered the options. A used Toyota Vios or Honda City was running about $8,000 to $10,000 in decent condition. A motorcycle would be cheaper, maybe $2,000, but Tessie said it wasn't safe and we couldn't transport building materials on a bike. The thing was, she wasn't wrong. We were spending about $200 a month on transportation, and owning a vehicle would give us freedom and flexibility. Plus, once the house was built and we moved in, we'd need a way to get groceries, go into town, visit family. I sold another chunk of my investments and purchased a used 2012 Toyota Vios for $9,500. It had 80,000 kilometers on it, no major issues, and Tessie's brother checked it out and said it was a good deal. The car, of course, had to be registered in Tessie's name. Foreigners couldn't own vehicles in the Philippines either. I was starting to see a pattern here, but what choice did I have? I needed the car. We needed the car. And we were married, so technically it was our car. Things seemed okay for the first few months. The car ran fine, we were making progress on the house construction, and I felt like we were building a life together. The first few months of owning the vehicle went well, but then the requests started coming more frequently. Before we were married, Tessie never asked for anything from me. She was happy and content, just being able to spend time together, go to the beach, cook meals at home. But when we were married, and especially after we bought the land and started construction, I could feel like she was more comfortable asking for things. Comfortable in a negative way. First, it was her mother. She needs $500 for her diabetes medication and doctor visits. I sent it. 2 months later, it was her sister. Her daughter needs $800 for school tuition and supplies. I sent it. Another month, it was the house construction. We need $2,000 more for the roof because the original quote didn't include the materials we actually want. I sent it. Then it was her brother. His motorcycle broke down and he needs it for work. $600 to fix it. I sent it. Every time, though, she brought it up. I said I was going to say no, but she just kept pushing and pushing. I didn't send them money. Things might not go well in terms of me and Tessie and how she acted around me. I couldn't bear the thought of having a miserable woman next to me, ruining my life. So I'd give in, transfer the money, and try to forget about it. By December 2019, the house was finished. It looked good. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a nice kitchen, a covered patio. Tessie was thrilled. Her family came over to see it and they all congratulated us, telling me what a wonderful provider I was, how blessed Tessie was. I'd now spent $102,000 total. Beach land, $35,000. Residential land, $45,000. Approximately $4,500. I had about $165,000 remaining in savings. I'd burned through $115,000 in just over a year when I included the taxes and penalties from early IRA withdrawals. I told myself $500 a month would be enough for our living expenses, but within 6 months of moving into the new house, it was closer to $1,200. And no matter how many times I looked at the figures, I couldn't explain where it was all going. It was groceries, utilities, gas for the car. Tessie's personal expenses like getting her hair and nails done, eating out more than we should, trips to visit her family, sending money for various family emergencies, and nights where I gave in to buying things we didn't really need because Tessie wanted them. I tried to track everything in a notebook, but half the time, Tessie would use the ATM card, which I'd given her for household expenses, and I wouldn't know what the charges were for until I checked the bank statement online. One evening, I sat her down and told her it couldn't go on like this, that the budget was $500 a month for us, plus maybe $200 for family help, and there was no more. I tried to make it sound firm but fair, and I told her that if we wanted to have any kind of future together, we had to stick to it. She nodded and didn't argue, but I could tell she wasn't happy. Her jaw was tight, her eyes wouldn't meet mine, and she got up from the table without saying anything. Every request after that turned into an argument. Every peso questioned, and I found myself second-guessing whether I was the one being unreasonable. She'd say things like, "You have so much money, and you won't help my mother? If you really loved me, you wouldn't make me beg for basic things. Your daughter probably spent more than this on her wedding and you didn't complain. I gave up my career to help you. Now you won't even support my family?" The guilt was crushing. Maybe I was being too tight with money. Maybe I was being selfish. These people had welcomed me into their family, and here I was counting every 1,000 pesos like Scrooge. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The math wasn't mathing, as they say. We had a paid-off house, a paid-off car, no rent, no mortgage, and we were burning through money like we were living in Beverly Hills. We lived in our house in Ormoc for about a year and a half. Our daily routine was pretty simple. Wake up, have breakfast, maybe drive into town for errands, come home, watch TV, go to bed. I was starting to get comfortable with the slower pace of life, though I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss certain things about America. The heat was oppressive during summer months. April and May were absolutely brutal, with temperatures in the high 90s and humidity that made it feel like you were breathing underwater. Our house had ceiling fans but no air conditioning, and Tessie said we didn't need it, that Filipinos were used to the heat. I wasn't used to it, though, and I found myself taking 3 or 4 showers a day just to cool off. When we went to the beach property on weekends, though, I felt more at peace. The ocean breeze kept things cooler, and there was something about being near the water that made all the stress and frustration fade away. We'd bring a cooler with beer and food, spend the day there, and I'd imagine what it would be like when we finally built a house on that lot and could live there full-time. One thing I noticed very quickly being in the Philippines was how communal everything was. In America, people kept to themselves. You didn't know your neighbors, you didn't get involved in family drama, you lived your own life. But in the Philippines, Everyone was in everyone's business. Tessie's family was at our house constantly. Her mother, her sisters, cousins, neighbors, always asking for something, always needing help, always expecting me to provide because I was the rich American. I attempted to integrate. I learned some basic Tagalog and Visayan phrases, salamat for thank you, kumusta for how are you, gusto ko for I want. I tried to be friendly with neighbors and family members, but I could tell they saw me differently. I wasn't Raymond. I wasn't a person with my own struggles and concerns. I was a walking dollar sign. I made a few expat friends. Guys in similar situations who'd married Filipinas and moved to the Philippines. We'd meet up at a bar in Ormoc every couple weeks and compare notes. Almost all of them had the same complaints. Money going out faster than expected. Wives always asking for family help. Feeling isolated and taken advantage of. One guy named Steve had been living in Leyte for 5 years. He'd been married to his Filipina wife for 7 years and had 2 kids with her. He told me straight up, never let them have control of the money. Never put property in their name. Keep separate bank accounts. Otherwise, you'll wake up one day and have nothing. I didn't want to hear it, though. I told myself Tessie was different. We were actually married. She was my wife, not some bar girl or scammer. She'd had a career before she met me. She wasn't like the others. But, underneath, I already knew I was caught in something I just couldn't pull myself out of. The money was disappearing faster than I could track. My savings were dwindling. And every time I tried to have a conversation about it, Tessie would either cry, get angry, or shut down completely. I felt trapped in my own house that I'd paid for. By this point, I'd already spent about $115,000, not including the taxes and penalties from early withdrawals, which probably added another $20,000 to my total losses. I had approximately $145,000 remaining in my retirement accounts. My original plan was to live primarily off investment returns and Social Security while keeping the principal intact. That plan was long gone. I told myself $500 a month would be enough to live on in the Philippines, but within a year and a half of being married and living in our own house, it was closer to $1,500 to $2,000 per month. And no matter how many times I looked at the figures, I couldn't explain where it was all going. It was groceries that somehow cost $300, $400 a month, even though food was supposed to be cheap. Utilities, including electricity that ran $150 a month because Tessie refused to turn off lights and fans, gas for the car that ate up $100 a month, even though we barely drove anywhere. Tessie's personal expenses like salon visits, clothes, makeup, phone load, family requests that came like clockwork, $200 here, $500 there, always an emergency, always urgent. Maintenance on the house and car that seemed constant. Medical expenses when Tessie or her family members got sick, birthday parties and celebrations that I was expected to fund, random expenses I couldn't even track, because Tessie had access to the ATM card. One evening in June 2020, right in the middle of COVID lockdowns, which made everything more stressful, I sat her down and told her it couldn't go on like this, that the budget was $1,000 a month maximum, and there was no more room for extra expenses. I tried to make it sound firm, but fair. And I told her that if we wanted to have any kind of future together, we had to stick to it. She nodded and didn't argue, but I could tell she wasn't happy. She said she'd try, but that her family needed help, that times were hard because of COVID, that I didn't understand how difficult it was for poor people in the Philippines. Every request after that turned into an argument, every peso questioned, and I found myself second-guessing whether I was the one being unreasonable. She'd throw my spending back in my face. You spent $35,000 on land you never even use. You bought this car and now you complain when it needs gas. You built this house and now you don't want to maintain it. The guilt manipulation was constant. She'd cry and say I didn't love her, that I only cared about money, that American men were so cold and heartless compared to Filipino men who would do anything for their family. I started to realize I'd made a terrible mistake, but I didn't know how to fix it. I'd already invested so much, not just money, but time and emotional energy. I'd burned bridges in America, sold everything I owned, move to a foreign country. What was I supposed to do? Admit defeat and go back with my tail between my legs? I convinced myself things would get better. Maybe once COVID was over and the economy improved, Tessie could go back to work. Maybe once her family got through their current hardships, the requests for money would slow down. Maybe I was overreacting and being too controlling with finances. But the numbers didn't lie. I was bleeding money at an unsustainable rate. Things did change when we moved into our own house in a way I wasn't expecting. Before we moved in, when we were living in Tessie's small apartment, she was more attentive, more affectionate, more present. But after we moved into the house I'd built, I could feel like she was more comfortable, but comfortable in a way that felt wrong. She stopped asking if I wanted things and started just doing or buying them. She'd go shopping and come home with bags of clothes and shoes and makeup. And when I'd ask how much she spent, she'd wave me off and say, "Not much," or "It was on sale." She'd invite her family over without telling me, and suddenly I'd come home to find 8 people in my living room expecting me to provide food and drinks. The most troubling change was her attitude toward me. Before we were married, Tessie was sweet, deferential, always making sure I was happy and comfortable. After we were married and living in the house, she became demanding and dismissive. "You're always complaining about money," she'd snap when I questioned an expense. "If you didn't want to support my family, you shouldn't have married a Filipina. You think you're so generous, but you're just cheap. Other foreigners treat their wives better than you treat me." I wasn't looking at her the same way anymore. The trust was broken. I felt like a fool. I couldn't shake the feeling that she'd played me from the beginning, that everything had been an act to get access to my money. I was quite friendly with one expat named Steve who'd been living in the Philippines for years, and when I told him about the spending, the family requests, the way Tessie had changed, I remember him just shaking his head saying, "Man, you got played. Classic Philippine marriage scam. Promise them everything before the wedding, then squeeze them dry after." I just didn't want to hear it, though. I didn't want to admit I'd been that stupid, but I couldn't ignore the signs anymore. Something else had changed, too. Tessie started taking trips by herself, back to her province to visit family, or to Cebu City for shopping, or to Manila to see an old friend. She'd be gone for 3 or 4 days at a time, and when I'd ask if I could come along, she'd say it was girl time or family business, and I'd be bored. During these trips, she was harder to reach. Before, she'd answer her phone immediately. We had an agreement that we'd always answer each other's calls, so we'd know the other person was safe. But when she traveled, calls would go to voicemail, messages would be read but not responded to for hours. When I'd ask about it, she had excuses. Her phone battery died and she forgot her charger, no signal in the area she was visiting. She was busy helping her mother with something. Her phone got wet and stopped working. She left it in her bag and didn't hear it ringing. At this point, I was definitely sure there was something going on. I didn't know if it was another man, if she was hiding money somewhere, if she was planning something behind my back, but my gut told me she wasn't being honest. By the time March 2021 rolled around, I'd spent about $145,000 total and had approximately $120,000 remaining. I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I had to do something. Things had to change. I tried to set boundaries, to have serious conversations about money and expectations and honesty. But every attempt at communication ended in an argument, or her crying, or giving me the silent treatment for days. I wasn't looking at her the same way anymore. The trust was broken. Every time she touched me, I wondered what she really wanted. Every time she smiled at me, I questioned whether it was genuine or just an act. I felt like a fool for believing any of it had been real. I was quite friendly with one expat who was in a similar situation, married to a younger Filipina, built a house, bleeding money, and when I told him I'd put everything in Tessie's name, I remember him just shaking his head saying, "Never do that, man, never. The only protection you have as a foreigner is keeping control of the cash. Once they have the assets, you have no leverage." I just didn't want to hear it, though, because what could I do about it now? The properties were already in her name. The car was in her name. I couldn't undo it. By the time summer 2021 rolled around, I was down to about $110,000. I knew I couldn't keep withdrawing from my retirement accounts at this rate. I had to do something. Things had to change. I tried to confront Tessie, to sit her down and have a serious conversation about our finances and where things were going wrong. "We need to talk about money," I said one evening after dinner. She immediately got defensive. "You're always talking about money. That's all you care about." "That's not true. I care about us having a future, but we're spending more than we're bringing in, and we can't keep doing that." "You have plenty of money?" "I don't, though. I've spent almost half of my retirement savings in 3 years. At this rate, we'll be broke in another 3 years." "Then get a job," she snapped. "I'm 64 years old. I'm retired." "The whole point of retiring was to not have to work." "Then stop complaining. You knew what you were getting into when you married me." "What does that mean?" But she wouldn't answer. She just walked away, went into the bedroom, and slammed the door. It only made things worse between us. She didn't see a problem with the spending. In her mind, I had money, and she was my wife, so the money should be spent on her and her family. That's how marriage worked in Filipino culture. The man provides for everyone. I couldn't believe I'd let this happen. Every day I felt more trapped. The house I paid for didn't feel like mine. The car I bought sat in a garage with her name on the registration. The beach property I'd imagined retiring to felt like a fantasy that would never happen. I started wondering if I could just walk away, abandon the properties, get on a plane, go back to America, and start over. But with what? I'd burned through most of my savings. I'd be going back broke at 64 years old with no house, no car, no assets. I'd have to live on $18,000 a year from Social Security and maybe find some part-time work to survive. The Philippines had trapped me in a nightmare I'd paid to build, myself. In August 2021, we were going to visit the beach property. We hadn't been there in several months because of COVID restrictions and general laziness on both our parts. Tessie kept saying we should sell it and use the money to renovate the house or invest in something else, but I'd refused. That beach land was my backup plan, my safety net, if everything else fell apart. At least I'd have that piece of paradise I could sell or build on. We drove down on a Saturday morning, about an hour south along the coastal road. When we arrived at the location where our land was supposed to be, I was looking forward to walking the property, maybe clearing some of the vegetation that had grown up, and making plans for what we might eventually build there. But when we got there was a house on our land. Not our house. Someone else's house. A small concrete structure with a red roof, a fence around the perimeter, and a family living there. Kids playing in the yard, laundry hanging on a line, a motorcycle parked out front. "What the hell is this?" I said, stopping the car on the road. Tessie was silent. Her face had gone pale. "Where's our land?" I asked her. "This is the right location, isn't it? This is where we bought the half-acre?" I don't know," she stammered. We got out of the car and walked toward the property. A middle-aged man came out of the house, looking suspicious of us approaching his property. I asked him in broken Visayan, "Excuse me, how long have you lived here?" "6 months," he said. "We bought this land from a woman in Ormoc." "Why?" My stomach dropped. "What woman?" He disappeared into the house and came back with paperwork. A deed of sale dated February 2021 to 6 months earlier, showing that he'd purchased the property for 1.2 million pesos, which was about $24,000. The seller's name on the document was Tessie's name. I turned to look at her. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Let's go," she said quietly. "Let's go back to the car." We drove back to Ormoc in complete silence. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. When we got home, I finally exploded. "What did you do?" "I can explain." "You sold the land?" "The land I paid $35,000 for. You sold it for $24,000 and didn't tell me?" "We needed the money," she shouted back. "You kept saying we were spending too much, that we had to cut back, that you were running out of money. So I sold the land to help us." "To help us?" Where's the money, Tessie? Where's the $24,000? She didn't answer. Where is it? I used some of it to help my mother. She needed surgery. Your mother had surgery 2 years ago and I paid for that. And I sent some to my sister for her son's schooling. I've been sending money for your sister's kids for 3 years. And the rest, I saved it, for emergencies. Show me. What? Show me the bank statement. Show me where you saved the money. She couldn't, because there was no money. She'd spent it or given it away or hidden it somewhere, and she'd done it all behind my back. I felt sick. I'd spent $35,000 on that land, plus early withdrawal penalties that probably brought the true cost to over $40,000, and she'd sold it for $24,000, and I never saw a single peso of it. What else have you lied about? I asked. I haven't lied. The house construction. You said it cost $28,000. How much did it really cost? She was crying now, but I didn't care. I wanted answers. How much, Tessie? About $18,000. So you pocketed $10,000. I didn't pocket it. I used it for things we needed. Show me receipts. She couldn't. She'd taken the money and spent it on herself or given it to her family, and she'd lied to me about the costs to justify taking more. The car, I said. How much did the car really cost? Raymond, please. How much? $7,000. The car cost $7,000. I'd given her $9,500. Another $2,500 disappeared. How much of the money I've given you was real expenses, and how much did you steal? I didn't steal from you. I'm your wife. What's yours is mine. No? I said coldly. What's mine is mine. What's yours is yours, because everything is in your name. The house is in your name. The land was in your name. The car is in your name. I own nothing. That's when the full weight of it hit me. I'd spent over $145,000 in the Philippines. I'd bought 2 properties, built a house, bought a car, supported her family for years, and I owned absolutely nothing. Not a single asset was in my name. Not a single property was legally mine. I was 64 years old, living in a foreign country, in a house I couldn't claim, with a woman who'd been systematically stealing from me for 3 years. By the time August 2021 came around, I looked at my account and did the math. Opening amount. I had started with $280,000 when I retired and moved to the Philippines in late 2018. Itemized losses. Beach land purchase, $35,000. Residential land purchase, $45,000. House construction, what I was told, $28,000. Car purchase, what I was told, $9,500. Monthly family support, $500 times 36 months equals $18,000. Emergency family requests, approximately $15,000 over 3 years. Living expenses, approximately $1,500, divided by month times 36 months equals $54,000. Early IRA withdrawal penalties and taxes, approximately $30,000. Total spent, approximately $235,000. Savings left, approximately $45,000. But the reality was even worse because Tessie had lied about costs. House actually cost $18,000, not $28,000, equals $10,000. Stolen, car actually cost $7,000, not $9,500, equals $2,500 stolen. Beach land sold for $24,000, and I never saw the money, equals $24,000 stolen. Unknown amounts from inflated emergency, requests and living expenses, total stolen, misappropriated, at least $36,500 that I could identify, probably much more. When the beach property was sold by Tessie without my knowledge for $24,000, and I got nothing. And after all the other fees and penalties and lies, I'd effectively lost over $200,000. I'd spent 3 years of my life, ruined my retirement, and drained my savings to build a life in the Philippines. What a nightmare it was. The fact that Tessie had gone behind my back and sold the beach property for $24,000 when I'd paid $35,000 for it, then spent or hid all the money instead of just telling me she wanted to sell it and giving me the proceeds. I'd have probably gone along with it if she'd been honest. But she went behind my back and basically stole my money for 6 months before I found out. Everything I'd paid for was in her name. House and land in Ormoc worth approximately $45,000, land plus $18,000, actual construction cost equals $63,000. Car worth approximately $6,000 depreciated from $7,000 purchase. Beach land worth $0 because she'd already sold it. Total value she kept. Approximately $69,000 of assets. Legal situation. I had no claim over any of it other than the fact it belonged to my wife. But did I really want her to be my wife now after what I'd seen and learned? The day I found out about the land being sold was the day I knew the marriage was over. I didn't know if I should just return to America immediately, but then I'm thinking, I have no house waiting for me there. I sold everything, and I can barely afford a plane ticket, let alone first and last month's rent on an apartment. I thought about my options. Stay in the house and try to work things out, unacceptable after the betrayal. Move out and rent somewhere else in the Philippines, expensive, and I was almost broke. Go back to Texas, nowhere to live, no money, would have to start over at 64. But then I'm thinking, the house is in her name, the car is in her name, but I'm the one who paid for everything. If I leave, she gets to keep it all. If I stay, maybe I can at least live rent-free while I figure out what to do next. She tried to fix things. For about a week after I found out, Tessie was apologetic and affectionate. She'd try to hug me, kiss me, tell me she was sorry, that she'd made mistakes, that she loved me and wanted to make things work. I'll never do it again, she promised. I'll be completely honest about money from now on. We can start over. How can I trust you? I asked. You've been lying to me for 3 years. You sold property behind my back. You stole tens of thousands of dollars from me. I didn't steal. I'm your wife. I was just trying to help my family. By lying to me? By forging my signature on documents? By selling land I paid for without telling me? I didn't forge your signature. The land was in my name. I had every right to sell it. And that's when it really sank in. She was right. Legally, she'd done nothing wrong. The land was in her name. She could do whatever she wanted with it. I had no legal claim to any of the property because Philippines law didn't allow foreigners to own land. I'd built my entire retirement plan on properties I could never legally own, and now I was paying the price for that stupidity. I just told her it's over. She could keep the house, keep the car, keep everything, but the marriage was done. I'd give her whatever she wanted in a divorce, but it's already over. She didn't take it well. She went from apologetic to angry in about 30 seconds. You're going to divorce me? After everything I've done for you? Everything you've done for me? You mean stealing from me? I gave you 3 years of my life. I could have married a younger man, a richer man, but I chose you. You chose my money. You never chose me. Get out of my house. Your house. I paid for this house. It's in my name. Get out. We screamed at each other for hours. Neighbors could probably hear everything. I didn't care anymore. I was done pretending. Done being polite. Done trying to make things work. The timeline of our separation. Week 1. I slept in the spare bedroom. We avoided each other. Zone. Week 2. Tessie left to stay with her mother in the province. She took the car. I was alone in the house. Week 3. She came back to get more of her things. We had another argument. She said if I wanted a divorce, I'd have to pay her settlement money. I laughed in her face. Week 4. I contacted a lawyer in Ormoc to ask about my options. He told me the truth I didn't want to hear. I had no legal claim to any of the properties. Divorce in the Philippines is nearly impossible. Annulment is the only option, and it takes years. And my best bet was to just leave the country and cut my losses. My idea was to make sure I protected whatever money I had left, get back to America somehow, and start over even though I was 64 years old and nearly broke. About a month after everything blew up, Tessie came back one final time. She showed up with her brother and her cousin, I think for intimidation or protection, I'm not sure which. "I want you out of the house," she said. "This is my property and I want you gone." "Fine," I said. "I'll leave, but I'm taking whatever I can fit in my suitcases. Just your clothes. Everything else stays. I paid for everything in this house, and it's all in my name. You want to take something? Call the police and explain to them how you, a foreigner, think you own property in the Philippines." She had me cornered. There was nothing I could do. I'd spent $200,000 plus to build a life in the Philippines, and I was leaving with 2 suitcases of clothes and about $40,000 in my bank account. When she knew I was serious about leaving, she softened a tiny bit. "You can have $5,000 of the money from the land sale to help you get back to America." It was insulting, but I took it. I needed every dollar I could get. I booked a flight to Manila and then on to Los Angeles. I'd stay with my daughter in California until I figured out my next move. The flight leaving Ormoc felt like punishment, not for the money I'd lost, but for all the time I'd wasted, convincing myself everything was real. I left the Philippines in October 2021, almost exactly 3 years after I'd arrived, full of hope and stupid dreams. The flight home felt like punishment, not for the money I'd lost, but for all the time I'd wasted convincing myself everything was real. Back in California, I had no choice but to start over from the bottom. My daughter let me stay in her guest room while I figured things out. I was 64 years old, sleeping on my daughter's couch, with $45,000 to my name and $18,000 a year in Social Security income. My new reality was harsh. Living situation, guest room at my daughter's house in San Diego, paying her $500, month rent, family discount, financial situation, $45,000 in savings, $18,000 divided by year, Social Security equals $1,500 divided by month income, minus $500 rent equals $1,000 divided by month to live on. Work situation. Had to find part-time work at 64 years old. Ended up working at Home Depot 25 hours a week for $16. Divided by hour equals extra $1,600 divided by month before taxes. Age factor. 2. Old to start over properly, too young to give up. I'm 67 now, still working at Home Depot, still living in my daughter's guest room, and only about $2,500 a month to live on between Social Security, my part-time job, and the occasional small withdrawal from my remaining savings. You can't live on that in California. You should be able to, but you can't. The anger has never left me, and the bitterness stayed in everything I did. And all I could think was that I traded away the last chance I had for retirement, for peace, for comfort, for something that was never real in the first place. The specific resentments that haunt me, I gave her everything and she gave me nothing but lies. The lies about construction costs hurt more than the money, the disrespect of selling property behind my back, the way she turned on me the second she realized I was out of money, the fact that she gets to keep a house and car that I paid for. I always think back to what I did and the time I had there with her. And if only she had been honest, if only I'd seen the warning signs, if only I'd listened to other expats who tried to warn me, things would have turned out like they should have done. And I hate her for it. I hate myself more, but I hate the fact that she played me so perfectly, so completely, and I was too blind and too desperate to see it until it was too late. If I could do it over, I would change everything. Never put property in someone else's name. I don't care if you're married. I don't care if it's the law. I don't care what promises they make. If your name isn't on the title, you don't own it, period. Set firm financial boundaries from the start. Decide what you're willing to spend on family help and stick to it. $200 month for her mother's medical expenses? Fine. But the second it becomes $500 here, $800 there, $2,000 for emergencies, that's when you say no. Listen, when family and friends warn you, my daughter told me not to buy property. My son told me to be careful. Other expats told me I was making mistakes. I ignored them all because I thought I knew better. Don't ignore red flags, the requests for money that started small and grew larger, the behavior changes after marriage, the difficulty reaching her during solo trips, the vague explanations about expenses. All of it was there from the beginning. Keep emergency money completely separate. Have one bank account she knows about and can access for household expenses. Have another account she doesn't even know exists with at least $50,000. That's your escape fund if everything goes wrong. I'm older now. I'm still working at Home Depot, and I'm still living in my daughter's guest room. I'm grateful she's let me stay, but I'm 67 years old, and I should be retired. I should be living in my own place. I should be comfortable. Instead, I'm stocking shelves and helping customers find plumbing supplies, and I'll probably have to keep working until I'm 70 or older just to survive. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I'm currently still living in San Diego with my daughter. It's been 3 years since I left the Philippines, and I've managed to stabilize somewhat, but I'm nowhere near where I should be at 67 years old. My current financial snapshot. Savings, $38,000, down from the $45,000 I had when I left Philippines because I've had to dip into it for medical expenses and other emergencies. Monthly income, $1,500. Social Security, plus $1,600. Part-time work equals $3,100 divided by month before taxes, about $2,700 after taxes. Property owned, none debt, none. At least I started with $280,000, which would have given me about $16,800. Year in investment returns at 6%, plus Social Security, which would have been enough to live modestly but comfortably in retirement. But I don't think you can look back at things and wonder too hard what would have been if I did things differently. My current routine is simple and depressing. Wake up at 6 a.m., work at Home Depot from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m., 5 days a week. Come home, eat, lunch, maybe go for a walk, watch TV with my daughter and her family in the evening, go to bed and repeat. I don't have much of a social life. I don't date. Who wants to date a broke 6-7-year-old man living in his daughter's guest room? I have a few friends from work, mostly other older guys working retail because they have to, not because they want to. I do know now that my wife, she is still my wife on paper technically because we never finalized any annulment or divorce, is still living in the house in Ormoc. I heard through a mutual expat friend that she tried to rent out rooms to other foreigners but couldn't get consistent tenants. She also tried to sell the property but couldn't get her asking price because the house construction quality wasn't great and it's already starting to deteriorate from lack of maintenance. She would have been in a lot better position if she'd just been honest with me, if we'd built something together as actual partners instead of her treating me like an ATM. But she didn't, and therefore she's not doing well either, from what I hear. The Philippines itself is a beautiful country, and I'm sure, in fact I'm guaranteed, that there are real and genuine people there, and there are genuine relationships between foreigners and Filipinos. But there are also people like Tessie who see foreign men as nothing more than retirement plans with wallets. I'm not saying everybody's like that. In fact, I know most people aren't. But the scammers and the con artists and the gold diggers are common enough that every single foreign man needs to be extremely careful. I'm telling this story because I want other people out there, other guys out there to know what can happen. How easy it could be to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars when you think with, let's just call it your heart instead of your head. I didn't think I was naive. I was a grown man in my 60 seconds. I'd worked in the oil industry for 38 years. I thought I knew better, but I got played right from the start, just as easily as a 5-year-old kid with his first paycheck. Specific red flags to watch from my story. Meeting someone who's conveniently a real estate agent. Of course she wanted to help me buy property. That's how she'd get control of my assets. Immediate talk about investments and buying land. Real relationships build slowly. Scam relationships move fast toward getting you to spend money. Everything has to be in her name because of Philippine law. Yes, the law is real, but that doesn't mean you should do it. Rent, don't buy. Or buy a condo in your own name where foreigners can actually own the unit. Behavior changes after marriage or after getting money, If she's sweet before the wedding and demanding after, you've been played. Family emergencies that never end. There's always another medical bill, another tuition payment, another broken motorcycle, another roof that needs fixing. If you see these warning signs, walk away. I don't care how beautiful she is, how perfect the relationship seems, how much you've already invested emotionally. Walk away before you're 67 years old working retail because you gave away your retirement to someone who never loved you. Don't buy property in someone else's name. Don't hand over control of your finances. Don't believe that what's mine is yours actually works when all the assets are in her name and you own nothing. And most importantly, don't put yourself in a position where you can't escape. Always keep enough money in an account she can't access to buy a plane ticket home and start over if you have to. 3 years ago, I thought I was building paradise in the Philippines. I thought I'd found love, found a partner, found a way to retire comfortably on my savings. 3 years later, I'm stocking shelves at Home Depot and sleeping in my daughter's guest room. I've seen so many people since I left the Philippines come into those expat Facebook groups with all the best intentions in the world, talking about the women they've met online, the properties they're planning to buy, the houses they're going to build. And they're the ones who have to learn the hard way, just like I did, that the dream doesn't match the reality. The fact that I still have some savings left, and I have Social Security income, and my daughter was willing to take me in when I came back from the Philippines broke and destroyed, compared to some guys who lost literally everything and ended up homeless or dead, that's got to be good enough for me. I thought I was making a smart investment by buying beachfront land in the Philippines, but I quickly realized that smart investments are the ones you actually own, not the ones that exist only on paper with someone else's name on the title. Even after all that happened, I know that Tessie is probably struggling with a deteriorating house she can't afford to maintain and a car that's falling apart. She squeezed me for every dollar she could get, lied to me for 3 years, and sold property behind my back. And she's still not doing well from what I hear. Karma, I guess. I thought I was building my dream retirement in the Philippines, but what I actually did was finance someone else's life while destroying my own. Just make better decisions if you want to do the same. Be smarter than I was. Protect yourself, keep control of your money, and never, ever put property in someone else's name, no matter how much you love them or trust them. You have been warned.